me see if I can go ahead with this. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think was that Siddharth? Okay. So like what is jaundice? Jaundice is yellowish discoloration of the skin, sclera, mucous membranes, and it results from deposition of the bile pigment bilirubin. Okay. So you may get a yellowish discoloration because of something like carotenes also, like your vitamin A, beta carotene. So that also can give rise to yellowish pigmentation of the eyes that could confuse with jaundice, or you could get a muddy conjunctiva due to exposure to dust. That also could sometimes be confused as jaundice. But usually, like these are the two things that might present or look like jaundice. But other than that, whenever you see a yellowish discoloration of these surfaces, you would think of the person having jaundice. So presence of jaundice on clinical examination, just one second, indicates hyperbilirubinemia. So when we are saying jaundice, the terminology that we're thinking of is like what the patient is having pathophysiologically is an increase in the bilirubin levels, that is hyperbilirubinemia, which is defined as a total serum bilirubin greater than 1.5 milligram per DL. Whereas clinically, you would not see it immediately. Like even if the bilirubin is more than 1 or 1.5, it might not be detected clinically. So clinically, jaundice or yellowish discoloration becomes evident or visible when the bilirubin is more than 3 in older children, and it requires something like more than 5 milligram per deciliter in case of newborns. So mild elevations in bilirubin might not be evident clinically. So if you got something like a 2 milligram per dl of hyperbilirubinemia, it might not be visible clinically and you might miss on it. So if you're suspecting some liver pathology or some hematological pathology and you want to check on it, you might as well do a blood test and check whether hyperbilirubinemia is present. So these are the clinical pictures. Can you see the picture of the newborn baby? Like if you can note the complexion of the baby, you can see it's got a yellowish hue to the entire skin. Like the face of the skin, not just the eyes, actually you cannot really make out the eyes whether they are yellow or not, but you can make out the entire skin of the face looks yellowish in color. Then you've got an eye, you seeing that the conjunctiva is having this yellow pigmentation is seen in the eye. We get yellowish this pigmentation in the conjunctiva. Conjunctiva is a very vascular structure, and the pigment gets deposited over there, and it gets pigmented very easily. So that's the reason we get it detected over there. And the third picture that you're having is showing two hands. One is showing the palm, which is having a yellowish discoloration, and a normal palm. So you've got the skin, mucous membranes, and the conjunctiva, three sites. You can also check at your tongue, your oral mucosa. That is another thing where you can detect the jaundice. You've got direct and indirect jaundice. These are the two terminologies. You also hear of conjugated and unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So hyperbilirubinemia is characterized by the fraction of bilirubin that is increased, unconjugated, indirect, or conjugated, direct. Elevation of either of these fractions results in jaundice. Conjugated hyperbole refers to a direct bilirubin of more than 1 milligram per dl or more than 20% of the total bilirubin level. Okay, so these are the latest definitions that we use, that even if the direct bilirubin is more than 1 milligram per dl, you would say that it is conjugated hyperbole. So it need not be more than 20% all the time. Even if it is more than 1, you would say it is conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So presence of conjugated hyperbilirubinemia suggests some hepatobiliary tract conditions. We'll look into that later as the presentation progresses. So this is your bilirubin, whatever happens with the bilirubin. We get bilirubin is produced from, we'll see that in the next. So we've got how bilirubin is produced. It is transported in the blood. It is taken up by the liver cells. Then we have got intracellular transport in the hepatocytes, like the endoplasmic reticulum is the one which is metabolizing it. There is conjugation with glucuronic acid. Then the bilirubin that is formed is secreted into the bile duct, the canaliculi, and through it into the bile duct. From here it goes into the duodenum, where it is metabolized in the intestines. There might be some enterohepatic circulation and renal excretion of bilirubin and urobilinogen. We'll see it again in a diagrammatic representation. So here we are seeing RBCs or erythrocytes. They are the major sources of your bilirubin. You also get other sources, like you can get it from the muscle, your myoglobin, your cytochrome oxidase. Those are the other cells which will give rise to bilirubin production other than RBCs, but the major source is the RBCs. So the RBCs contain hemoglobin. The hemoglobin is old RBCs, senescent RBCs, damaged RBCs. Those are caught up by the spleen, the splenic macrophages, your reticuloendothelial system. It catches hold of these old or damaged RBCs and splits them. The hemoglobin is converted into heme and globin. So the globin is the protein part, and the heme is then acted upon by heme oxygenase, and you get biliverdin initially, and then biliverdin gives rise to your bilirubin. This bilirubin is unconjugated and it may be protein bound. So this bilirubin, which is produced in the unconjugated bilirubin, which is produced in the spleen, would be transported by the blood to the liver. Here the liver cells will be taking it up. This is an entirely active process where the liver cells are taking up the unconjugated bilirubin. They'll take it up. The endoplasmic reticulum will metabolize it with the help of the enzyme UDP, glucuronosyl transferase. So UGT is the enzyme, and you'll get bilirubin mono and diglycerides, which will be ultimately excreted in the biliary canaliculi, and those will be excreted into the duodenum through the bile duct. From the bile duct, this bilirubin is acted upon by the gut flora, the microbiota that is there in the gut, resulting in production of urobilinogen. Now this urobilinogen will be reabsorbed. There is some enterohepatic circulation. Like some part of this is again split into its monoglucuronides, and some part is reabsorbed by the blood and taken back to the liver as well as the kidney, whereas some of it gets excreted into the stools or the feces. The oxidized urobilinogen is called as stercobilin, which is excreted into the feces, and the urobilinogen, which is getting excreted through the kidneys also in the form of urobilinogen. So this is the entire cycle. So we can see here that the RBC, if you've got a lot of overproduction of bilirubin, it will be because of your RBCs are getting lysed. So more number of RBCs are getting destroyed by your spleen because of some hemolytic conditions. For example, a lot of unconjugated bilirubin will get produced, and this unconjugated bilirubin would be presented to the liver. So the liver has got some capacity to excrete this bilirubin. So because of this, it's a rate limiting step. The excretion of bile is a rate limiting step. So whatever unconjugated bilirubin the liver is getting, if the load is too excessive, this will increase. So when you've got excess production, destruction of RBCs will result in excess production of bilirubin. We'll see that later. And so this is again in another way, the metabolism. You can see the senescent erythrocytes, heme is getting acted upon by a heme oxygenase, resulting in biliverdin production. Biliverdin is green in color, and then biliverdin reductase is resulting in production of your bilirubin albumin complex. So it's covalently bonded with albumin. It's going to the blood, taken up by the hepatocytes, then acted upon by the ER, excreted. Same thing. We've already seen this. So from this, what we have seen is like we've got the two components, the basic pathophysiology. We've got unconjugated and conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So unconjugated, whenever there is overproduction of bilirubin. So as you see in the previous slide, this slide. So if lots of RBCs are getting lysed, the number of the bilirubin formed will be more. and the unconjugated bilirubin will go up. So this is the second pathophysiology for your unconjugated bilirubin or indirect hyperbilirubinemia is reduced uptake of bilirubin. So the production is normal. So normal RBCs are producing normal bilirubin, but the bilirubin that is taken up by the hepatocytes, there is some defect or some problem in that. Again, this will result in a rise in the unconjugated bilirubin. We'll see a few conditions later on in the slide. And you could get like normal production of bilirubin from RBCs, normally taken up by the hepatocytes, but the conjugation part, there is some impairment in that. Like for example, your UGT, your enzyme is not working properly, you may get a rise in the indirect hyperbilirubinemia. So do we get the three basic concepts when you will get indirect hyperbilirubinemia? You're either getting a lot of production of bilirubin because of destruction of your RBCs, mainly. In a few cases, it might be because of your muscle also getting damaged. The second pathophysiology for indirect hyperbilirubinemia is reduced uptake of bilirubin, and third is impaired conjugation of the bilirubin. So that was for the unconjugated part. For the conjugated, extrahepatic cholestasis, you will get some obstruction to the bile flow in the extrahepatic part. So extrahepatic part is your bile ducts. So anywhere from your biliary tree in the extrahepatic part of your biliary tree or your intestines, there is some obstruction to the bile flow that is labeled as extrahepatic cholestasis. You might get some obstruction to the bile flow within the liver. So any obstruction which is happening to the bile flow from the hepatocyte, it is getting excreted in the biliary canaliculi. So anywhere in that part, if you're getting obstruction, it is labeled as intrahepatic cholestasis, and you might get conjugated hyperbilirubinemia because of direct damage to the liver cell. Okay, so hepatocellular injury. So these are the three ways where you can get your conjugated and unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Okay. So next, I don't know, how do we go ahead? So you've got a little bit of differentiation. You've got age-wise, there is differences in the etiology of jaundice. So the table that I am showing you right now is showing you differential diagnosis of jaundice in newborns and young infants. So as we saw three mechanisms. We saw increased production of bilirubin, decreased hepatocellular uptake, or impaired conjugation. So though I've used only two columns over here, there are three pathophysiologies. Increased production of bilirubin, as we have seen in a newborn baby, the commonest condition that we all know is of your RH incompatibility. You may also get ABO incompatibility. So what I think, like, it's difficult to have an interactive session for someone like me who is not knowing how to go about it, but like I'll just let it be a one-way thing as of now. So the mother is having, suppose the mother is RH negative and the baby happens to be RH positive, or if the mother is O blood group and the baby happens to be A or B. So the baby is carrying some antigens on its RBCs which are foreign to the mother, and there could be some feto-maternal bleeding could be there. So some RBCs of the baby or the fetus might leak into the baby's, might leak into the mother's circulation, and the mother's immune system will pick up these antigens as foreign and will produce antibodies against it. So a mother who is having O blood group with a baby who is having either A or B, or mother who is having RH negative and the baby is RH positive. So the mother's body is going to produce antibodies against those antigens. The antibodies are able to, they can cross the placenta. So now these antibodies will go and destroy the babies, the fetus's RBCs, and this will result in RBC destruction. So as we saw, a lot of RBC destruction will result in a lot of bilirubin production. And this unconjugated increased load of unconjugated bilirubin will be reflected in your indirect hyperbilirubinemia and jaundice in a newborn baby. So that is one cause of hemolysis in a newborn baby. You may also get erythrocyte defects. So you can get membrane defects. So something like hereditary spherocytosis. You can get elliptocytosis, ovalocytosis. So these are all membrane defects because of which, like, a normal shape of an RBC is biconcave. So a biconcave RBC can squeeze. So the size, like if you can remember your physiology, RBC is like 8 micron, and a capillary is approximately like 5 micron. So 8 micron RBC has to squeeze through a 5 micron capillary during circulation. So how does it do that? It has got a 8 shape, like it's a biconcave. RBCs are biconcave. They're able to squeeze, twist through the capillary and pass through it. But whereas if it's a spherical, elliptical, or oval, or a sickle shaped RBC, this will not be possible. So they won't be able to squeeze, and here they'll get damaged. And these damaged RBCs will be picked up by your spleen as damaged RBCs, and they'll be destroyed further, which will result in again increased bilirubin production. And this bilirubin again would be your unconjugated or indirect hyperbilirubinemia. We've also got some erythrocyte enzyme defects. The common ones that we know of are your G6PD deficiency, which is a X-linked recessive condition. Since it is a X-linked recessive, so it would manifest in boys, as girls will have 2 X's, and we would hope that both the X's would not be affected. So girls would invariably be protected. There are a few rare circumstances when even girls might be affected because of G6PD deficiency, but usually they are not. So X-linked recessive will manifest, G6PD deficiency will manifest in boys mainly, and usually you don't get hemolysis all the time in G6PD deficiency. It's usually due to some stress, infections, viral infections, some drugs. So those are the ones which may cause, you cannot, is required, annotate the shared contain. Okay. Okay. So we've got so the enzyme deficiencies. You've got G6PD deficiency. You've got pyruvate kinase deficiency. Both of them can be seen. Then you've got disseminated intravascular coagulation. Again, because of the increased like you've got a mismatch. There's a bleeding somewhere, thrombosis somewhere. Lots of RBCs will be getting trapped in the thrombosis, resulting in increased bilirubin production. So any hemolysis will result in increased production of indirect or unconjugated bilirubin. That is one. Now, if there are the total number of RBCs themselves are increased, for example, in polycythemia, like if you are having a child with, you've got a like in newborn babies, you'll get polycythemia as seen in cases of delayed cord clamping. Like if somebody gets delivered outside, the cord is not clamped early, you might get polycythemia. In you get cyanotic heart diseases, which can present with polycythemia. So when the total number of RBCs in circulation are very high, obviously the number that is getting destroyed will also be a little bit on the higher side. And this too might result in increased production of indirect bilirubin. The third thing that you see in increased production is some bleeds inside your body. So in a newborn baby, the commonest thing that we see is Kefal hematoma. So Kefal hematoma, as the word itself describes, and like you're in 8th semester, you guys must have gone through your newborn posting. So the Kefal hematoma is like because of some difficult passage deliveries, you might get some bleeding, periosteal bleedings. Okay. So because of that, the blood is accumulated in your periosteum. You get a hematoma over there, and this blood, obviously the RBCs are going to get destroyed over there, and there will be increased release of your bilirubin from these collected hematomas inside your, concealed hematomas inside your body. So Kefal hematoma you might get in muscular bleeds also sometimes. You might get hidden bleeds anywhere in the body, which might result in increased production of indirect bilirubin. So that is one cause of the unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. The other causes that we mentioned are decreased hepatocellular uptake or conjugation. So conjugation, as we all know, there are two inherited conditions, Gilbert syndrome and Crigler-Najjar. Gilbert, you might get both mechanisms. You might get some decreased hepatocellular uptake as well as conjugation, whereas Crigler-Najjar is exclusively a problem with the conjugation of the bilirubin. So your UGT enzyme is either deficient or it is completely absent, and this will result in no conjugation happening, and hence these kids will have indirect hyperbilirubinemia. So a defect in conjugation, classical, is your Crigler-Najjar syndrome and a few cases of Gilbert syndrome also. Decreased hepatocellular uptake. So premature babies, or even why do we get physiological jaundice of the newborn? Because the mechanisms, mechanisms of hepatocellular uptake and conjugation, both are a little bit immature. Like when the fetus was in utero, this entire bilirubin metabolism was taken care of by the mother. It was taken care of by the mother's liver. Whereas suddenly, as the cord is clamped and cut, the baby's liver will suddenly have to manage all this load of bilirubin on its own. And a few of these mechanisms are not mature as yet. They take a few days to mature. And hence what we get is physiological jaundice of the newborn. Now, all these things will be to some extent exaggerated in a premature baby. So like this maturation of the metabolism systems of the newborn baby for metabolizing the bilirubin will be like very much slower or lesser working in cases of premature babies, and hence these babies will also present with exaggerated physiological jaundice, or you may get pathological jaundice in premature babies also. Same thing you get in congenital hypothyroidism. We should never forget anyone having hyperbilirubinemia, particularly beyond 2 weeks, a newborn baby who is having jaundice beyond 2 weeks, or if you're keeping a track of the baby and it's an otherwise healthy baby, you can wait up to 3 weeks. But anyone having beyond that persistent indirect hyperbilirubinemia, you would definitely want to rule out congenital hypothyroidism, because it's a treatable condition and it can have a severe sequelae in the form of mental retardation. So it's like a preventable or a treatable cause of mental retardation. So treatable only when you detect it early and treat it quickly. Once the detection is delayed or you miss the boat, you miss the boat. So you can't really reverse what is lost. You can only maybe preserve whatever is left. So you don't want to miss out congenital hypothyroidism in any baby, newborn baby who is having jaundice, which is exaggerated, indirect hyperbilirubinemia, which is prolonged or exaggerated, because it's a preventable or treatable cause of mental retardation. So always, like whenever you're sending a sample for hyperbilirubinemia in a newborn baby, do screen the baby. So it should ideally be universal screening. All babies should be screened, but definitely a baby who's having jaundice would want to screen this baby for hypothyroidism. So never miss that. So we've seen prematurity, hypothyroidism, physiological jaundice of newborn, breast milk jaundice. Now this is something which will usually be seen in the later half of the neonatal period. So it usually comes beyond the second or third week of the first month of life, like a baby who's 21 days old or something like that. So initially there is maybe jaundice or less jaundice or no jaundice, and later on the child develops jaundice anywhere between 3 to 12 weeks of life. Otherwise, well baby exclusively breastfed. So there might be some components in the mother's milk. There are some hormones which might result in increased enterohepatic circulation of the bilirubin, resulting in jaundice, which is usually harmless. So these are the causes which you should think of in cases of a newborn baby with unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So these are, I've highlighted only the major ones, the ones we should always look for in all newborn babies. There's a big list otherwise. So these are the previous slide we saw unconjugated in newborns. This is conjugated hyperbilirubinemia in newborns. So again, liver diseases with hepatocellular injury, obstruction of the biliary system, and defects of bilirubin metabolism or transport. So I'll just finish off the rare or uncommon one, that is the extreme right column, defect of bilirubin metabolism or transport. So your hepatocyte will be excreting the conjugated bilirubin into the biliary canaliculi. So there is a small canaliculi running alongside one of the hepatocyte membrane. So this transport from the liver hepatocyte to the canaliculi happens through some channels, and there are some receptors involved in this. So if you have some problem in these receptors, you might get a group of conditions, and these are, many of them are familial and genetic or hereditary conditions. And these group of conditions where you get a problem, there's a defect in the bilirubin transport or metabolism, they're called as progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis. So PFIC, so if you, that's the way we usually, PFIC, progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis. And some of them, if you detect early, they really do well. And they've got some palliative or definitive care is available if you detect them early. So though an uncommon cause, if you detect them early, you might be able to help the babies and the parents of these babies. So one cause of defect of bilirubin transport is PFIC. The others that you know, just as you have unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you had Crigler-Najjar, same way you have Duven-Johnson and Rotor syndrome, where there is some genetic problem in excretion of the conjugated bilirubin into the biliary system. So these are the two conditions that you should remember for bilirubin metabolism or transport: PFIC and Duven-Johnson and Rotors. So that's the rarer of the conditions that we have seen, but important all the same. Then you've got obstruction of the biliary system. So the main thing, like all direct or conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, the urgency of detecting it and evaluating the child is probably because not entirely for this disease, but mainly for this disease, and that is biliary atresia. So biliary atresia is something that is, the treatment is time bound. You can't really just at your leisure evaluate the child, at your leisure treat the child. You've got a very fixed, you've got a limited time range when the interventions are going to be really helpful. So biliary atresia is something where your bile duct, mainly your extrahepatic, but sometimes within your intrahepatic also. So extrahepatic biliary atresia is your extrahepatic bile duct is either atretic or it is not functioning properly. It's a remnant is present over there, which results in the bile not getting excreted into your duodenum. So blockage to the bile flow because of some inflammatory process which results in blocking of the extrahepatic bile duct component. So what we saw is, like any newborn baby was having direct jaundice. So it might be even in the first 2 weeks, but definitely beyond 2 weeks. If you have got a newborn baby so if you get jaundice in a newborn baby beyond second or in some circumstances beyond third week, you definitely want to do a total bilirubin as well as a fractionated bilirubin. Because you have a tendency, there is a tendency even amongst us pediatricians that we will assume everything to be physiological. So like jaundice hai, physiological rahega. So this is not going to, we are going to miss out on some cases, pathological cases, which might benefit by early detection. So any child, any newborn baby who is icteric beyond second or third week of life, you definitely want to do a total and fractionated bilirubin. And if it is showing a direct bilirubin of more than 1 milligram per DL or more than 20% of the total, then you definitely want to rule out extrahepatic biliary atresia in this child. If you do a Kasai procedure, modified Kasai procedure or a portoenterojejunostomy in these babies, within the first month of life, the baby might survive on the native liver. There are very good results. Like the likelihood of these children surviving on the native results are very high, particularly if it's been done at an experienced center. Whereas if these kids get operated at 1 to 3 months, like the results drop down very significantly. Like operated by 1 month, success rate might be something like 70 to 90%. Operated 1 to 3 months, success rate is something like 30 to 50%. Beyond 3 months, the success rate is really pathetic. Like it could be less than 30%, so to say. But it's most of the times these children are going to land up with a failed Kasai and result in will eventually require a liver transplant. So it's a time-bound intervention for biliary atresia. So you never want to miss out in a newborn baby beyond second or third week. Get a total and fractionated bilirubin. If it is direct, you want to rule it out by doing a liver biopsy. And sometimes some surgeons would prefer for a scan, but a liver biopsy should suffice as of now. So mainly biliary atresia, an obstruction of biliary system. The other cause that we want to look at in a newborn baby also is choledochal cyst. It might be present in the later on age group also. So that's obstruction of biliary system. We took a lot of time on that part, but since it is important, I wanted to stress on it. The first column that we're seeing, because of liver diseases, conjugated hyperbilirubinemia due to hepatocellular injury or due to liver diseases. You can get acute liver damage. Any child, suppose the child had HIE, did not cry immediately after birth, required a lot of resuscitation, has landed up with hypoxia, ischemia, is having some acidosis. It's going to affect all organs. It's going to affect your heart, going to affect your liver, it's going to affect your kidneys, and the liver damage is going to result in some rise in your direct bilirubin. So that is one cause. So any hypoxic ischemic injury in a newborn baby as well as in the later on age groups might result in conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Then you've got certain infections which can cause your direct bilirubin to go up. So in a newborn baby, it's sepsis, the commonest thing that you want to keep in mind, and which is treatable with early detection and proper antibiotic use. So that sepsis is one. You've got your TORCH group of infections. So you've got toxoplasma, rubella, cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex. So of these, you've got herpes simplex is something that present with acute liver failure. So rest of them is usually present as a non-sick child, a non-sick baby, whereas your herpes simplex and sometimes CMV might present with not just cholestasis, but they'll present with in a child with acute liver failure, where the child might be having bleeding or INR might be deranged. Also, basically, it's a sick child. So infections, you've got viral or other hepatitis. So some viral organisms like enteroviruses can cause in a newborn period or an early infant you can get. Then you've got, you use in NICU, you use TPN, total parenteral nutrition. So that is another thing that can cause. You've got metabolic liver diseases like galactosemia, neonatal hemochromatosis, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and mitochondrial defects. So those are your metabolic conditions. So, and just one second. In older infants, again, the same causes of hemolysis. Hepatocellular uptake, you can get Gilbert. Whereas in conjugated, the ones that you have to remember are your viral hepatitis, hepatotropic viruses. So you have to keep them in mind. Then you've got your systemic viruses, HSV, EBV, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalo. You've got some toxins. This is one important entity that you have to keep in mind, autoimmune hepatitis. Wilson's as the metabolic cause, and the other causes that we've seen previously also, those also we have to keep in mind. So conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, and you have a list of causes over here. Then you've got choledochal cyst in the obstruction of biliary system, gallstones, cholecystitis. Again, PFIC you might get in these children. So that's it. So I hope you had a revision of this topic. There was no way I could interact with you. I'm really sorry. Probably I'll take some inputs on how to go about it the next time around. Okay, I saw just a chat group over here. Okay, I could have used that. Probably, hopefully we have it next time around. We can use it. I hope you found this useful. And if you have any doubts, you can just post it on my number. I think most of you might be having it, and I could help you out with your whatever difficulties you're having. So thank you and take care of yourselves and your family.